This is my third time trying to film this video. This better work. Hi, my name's Alana, and on this YouTube channel, we talk about books because we're nerds and we have nothing else to talk about. If I seem a little spacey, it's because I'm tired. I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, you know what I'm saying? And we're going to be reviewing Bleak House today. I'm just checking to make sure that my microphone has a little light on it. See that it's recording. You catching this? So Bleak House by Charles Dickens. This is the last book that I finished in 2021. And I have to say, I ended the year off with a very enjoyable read. And so I am going to do my best to maybe whet your appetite to potentially pick up this book. It's been sitting on my shelf for a couple of years now. And Dickens is an author that intimidates me, and Bleak House intimidated me maybe more so than War and Peace, which I plan to read this year. The reason why is Dickens talks a lot. He has subplots within subplots within subplots, and I have read Dickens novels in the past, and quite frankly, there are points in the novel where I'm like, I have no idea what's happening. He sums it all up in the end, but you're like, did you really need to do that? But somehow I still like his writing. It's a little bit of a love-hate relationship. But I just enjoy Bleak House from beginning to end. I think it's much more approachable than some of his other novels. And I actually found this novel to be hilarious as well. I chuckled through the whole thing. So the way that I'm going to structure this review, because this is a 1,000-page novel, because my boy Chuck was getting paid per word. And the way that I'm going to structure this is I'm going to just kind of give an overview of the plot, introduce some of the key characters, and then go into a couple of the themes that I enjoyed in this novel, and then give my overall thoughts in a review. So again, I'm really hoping that the audio doesn't come out. Please, 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 God. Dramatic much. So Bleak House is a novel, and in this novel there's an infamous court case called Jarndyce and Jarndyce. And if you see me looking down, it's because I have my notes and some quotes typed up that I want to make sure that I talk about to stay on topic, because I like to ramble, and which is also what editing is for. So there's this infamous court case, Jarndyce and Jarndyce, that's running in the background of this novel. And what's at the forefront of this novel are the people who are involved and or somehow got pulled into this court case. And so also, as I'm looking here, my laptop is dying. I can't win. So the court case is running in the background, but it's really about the people. And most specifically, our protagonist, our main character, is Esther Summerson. So her parentage is a bit of a mystery, and this novel does kind of go into who her parents are and why it's a bit scandalous. And then we also have Ada and Richard, who are distant cousins who have some, they're involved in the case. I wouldn't say, I don't know if involved is the right word, but they do have some involvement. There's no other way to put it. And then we do have Mr. Jarndyce, who takes on Esther, Ada, and Richard as wards in his house, Bleak House. And so the novel, there's also, before I move forward, there's also a bit of a whodunit. There are some murders that happen in this novel. And so who is the murderer? #drama. Sounds like a bit like a soap opera, doesn't it? So we have the novel begins in this excellent, moody, evocative way, as is characteristic of Dickens. I mean, if you've read the opening paragraph of A Tale of Two Cities, chef's kiss. It's descriptive, it's dirty, it's cold, it's muddy. Dickens dives right in with some attorneys right at the first few pages, and it's kind of obvious that Dickens is not a fan of solicitors. But this is one sentence that really stuck out to me. It says, "In trickery, evasion, procrastination, spoliation, botheration, under false pretenses of all sorts, there are influences that can never come to good." I mean, that is just a really good example of how Dickens writes. He plays around with words, he plays around with rhymes. He has interesting word structure. He really is a master of the English language. And to be frank, because this is my third time recording this, I should have all of these quotes memorized, but alas, I do not. I really adore the main character, Esther. She's humble, she's smart, she's witty, she's kind, and she knows how to have difficult conversations with people. She really has mastered the art of tactfulness. And because she is such an engaging person and such a kind person, she has many admirers. And there are some very funny proposal scenes in this book that cracked me up. And she has a little love interest of her own, but I'm not going to spoil that too much for you. See, I'm trying not to touch my hair, but I just feel like it's like pressing close around my neck. 1 second. I'm trying to that's better. Try not to touch. Again, we have Ada, who is your classic Dickensian goody two-shoe. She's beautiful. She's innocent. She might not be as intelligent as Esther, but it's not a Dickens novel without a perfect female protagonist who's just pretty to look at and innocent. Classic Dickensian. We have Richard, a young man who is at kind of like the coming of age for a man during this time period, and he needs to settle down. He needs to pick a career / profession, but he gets too involved in John Dice, and so that does have some repercussions for him. Ada and Richard do have a little tang going on, but you can't get your hopes up with that one. I don't feel like that's a spoiler. It's pretty early on. Just Mr. John Dice says, you guys are young. Maybe you guys should be a little bit more conservative and wait to see how some things play out. So there's definitely some drama with that. There's this wacky character named Mr. Skimpole, who I found to be hilarious. And he's a man that Mr. Jarndyce refers to as a child, meaning he never grows up. He is always asking other people for money to take care of his business. And he's artistic, he's philosophical. Never mind the fact that he's married with 2 or 3 daughters. I believe he has 3 daughters. And he just is not a responsible human being. And people just kind of wave him off as being a child. He's just quirky, he's different. But is he really? Is he really? And there are some repercussions for his actions as well. But there's this really funny quote from Mr. Skimpole complaining that his landlord took his possessions because he didn't pay rent. He said, the oddity of this is that my chairs and tables were not paid for, and yet my landlord walks off with them as composedly as possible. Well, duh. Bro, you need to pay rent. Nothing is free. Nobody lives for free. But I mean, he's a character. And one thing that I think that why Dickens focuses so much or has so many scenes with Mr. Skimpole is because it shows, again, a man who never really quite settled down. He has a wife, he has a children, but he's not a responsible adult. And you see Richard kind of heading in that direction. He doesn't, and what happens if he does or if he does not take heed to Mr. Jarndyce's wisdom. And then speaking of Mr. Jarndyce, it is odd that the court case is Jarndyce and Jarndyce, and we have a Mr. Jarndyce. Who's the other Jarndyce? This whole court case is a bit of a tangled mess. And it remains cryptic the whole way through. Dickens never really gives you a lot of details about the case. Just how, like, this court case has been going on for so long, so the characters themselves don't even really know what this court case is about. I'm going to get a little bit more into that later once I start talking about some of the themes and why I think Dickens did that. We have a Sir Lister and a Lady Dedlock, who are a wealthy couple. Obviously, they're a sir and a lady, and they are seemingly picture perfect, but Lady Dedlock definitely has something that she's hiding, and Dickens hints on very early on that this marriage is not exactly as perfect as it seems. And here I quote, "But whether each evermore watches and suspects the other, evermore mistrustful of some great reservation, whether each is evermore prepared at all points for the other, and never to be taken unawares, what each would give to know how much that other knows. All this is hidden for the time in their own hearts. Getting this alert from my Mac. I need to plug it in soon. I think that's great because Sir Lister and Lady Dedlock are actually paralleled with another couple who are having some marital problems because of secrets. And so Dickens does that really, really well. And of course, over time, Dickens is going to weave all of this stuff together to make sense. That is one thing that Dickens does really well, even though he has a lot of subplots, and a lot of those subplots, quite frankly, aren't necessary. He does tie them all together for this overarching picture in the novel, and I think it's always brilliantly done. As I'm going to go into Mr. Jarndyce a little bit more because I think he himself fits into one of the themes that I noticed really well in the novel. So let's go ahead on and dive into some themes. So classic Dickens, he is spending a lot of time in this novel critiquing the wealthy and how they're often hypocritical. There are a few characters in here who are charitable for the sake of appearances to make themselves look good, but they are not taking care of essential things within their own homes. Their families are falling apart. Their kids are wayward or, not really cared for the way they should be. Their marriages are falling apart. But on the outside, they're doing all of these doing these really great things for other people. But for what? It's all for appearances. And here's a quote here. There are two classes of charitable people. One, the people who did a little and made a great deal of noise. The other, the people who did a great deal of the people who did a great deal and made no noise at all. We see this particularly with the character named Joe, who is a poor and / poverty-stricken young man who just seems to be in everybody's way and is quite frankly considered a nuisance by many. And this is how he's described. He is not softened by distance and unfamiliarity. He is not a genuine foreign-grown savage. He is the ordinary homemade article. Homely filth begrimes him. Homely parasites devour him. Homely sores are in him. Homely rags are on him. Native ignorance, the growth of English soil and climate, sinks his immortal nature lower than the beasts that peril. Stand forth, Joe, in uncompromising colors. From the sole of thy foot to the crown of thy head, there is nothing interesting about thee. And so Dickens therefore uses Mr. Jarndyce to juxtapose those people who do charitable things just for recognition and to make themselves seem benevolent. And Mr. Jarndyce is extremely charitable. He's taken in Ada and Richard and Esther as his wards at Bleak House. And when they thank him for this, because Ada and Richard are orphaned, again, Esther doesn't know who her parents are. So she's been cared for by, a person here, a family member here, then at a home here for girls. And he didn't have to do this, but he decided to do this out of the kindness of his own heart. And he is the type of person who, when he sees somebody that needs assistance or needs help, or he sees something that would simply make somebody's life happier, he just goes out quietly, figures out how to get it done, and then he does it. And then when he's thanked, he's like, oh, you don't really need to thank me. No problem. It's whatever. He wants to quietly do it and go on about his way. Mr. Jarndyce also appreciates this in other people, which is one reason why he likes Esther so much, because she is quite a humble person. And he also is really a fan of Mr. Woodcourt, who Esther and Mr. Woodcourt, who's a doctor, have a tang going on. They do. But will they or will they not get together? That is the question. And but this is what Mr. Jarndyce says about Mr. Woodcourt. He said, a man whose hopes and aims may sometimes lie, as most men's sometimes do, I dare say, above the ordinary level, but to whom the ordinary level will be high enough after all, if it should prove to be a way of usefulness and good service leading to no other. All generous spirits are ambitious, I suppose, but the ambition that calmly trusts itself to such a road instead of spasmodically trying to fly over it is of the kind I care for. So, The reason why that stuck out so much to me as one of the themes is because I think it's extremely relevant to, I mean, I think it's always relevant in society, especially now with social media, where if I do a charitable act or something that's good, that makes me look like a nice, giving, caring person, I can take my phone, take a picture, take a video, post it online and say, look at this thing that I did. Look at this thing that I donated. Look at this money that I gave to so-and-so. Look at this person that I helped out. Look what a good person I am. And I can always even hide that under the guise of, I did this to show you that there are good people in the world, to encourage you to do good things also, but let me go head on and get praise at the click of a button. So it always kind of harkens back to motives and why people do the things that they do. Are they really doing it out of the kindness of their heart, or are they really trying to seek something that's a bit selfish and narcissistic? So that's one reason why I think that particular theme stuck out so much to me. I also liked how, which is very classic Dickens, this novel does focus on forgiveness and redemption, because you have these characters, especially Richard, who is so engrossed and overly involved in Jarndyce and Jarndyce that it destroys some of the relationships around him, and it hurts some of the relationships around him. It hurts him. He gets so obsessed with it that it wears on him physically and mentally. But with Dickens, there are characters that always get some type of recompense. They have some type of come to Jesus moment, or they see the error of their own ways. And Dickens has some of these things come back for a circle. And some people, this does bother them about Dickens. Then you're like, well, life is not picture perfect. It never ends up neatly in a bow. I will say that in this, he doesn't give the reader, there are some sad moments in this book. It's not, happy-go-lucky in the end, but he does tie things up nicely, and he does at least he does sprinkle some sprinkles on some things, so some of the blows aren't as big of a punch in the gut, if you will. And so, not only that, you have couples forgiving their spouses. And even when they've done something, or something was revealed about what they've done that was, quite egregious, especially for a married couple, that you probably shouldn't keep certain secrets from your spouse. There's just this, I don't care what you've done. You mean more to me than my reputation. And here's a really great quote from one character, I won't say who. He says, he can yet pronounce her name with something like distinctness in the midst of those intrusive sounds, and in a tone of mourning and compassion rather than reproach. So the last thing I'll mention theme-wise is one thing that I asked myself while I was reading this novel is, because the nature and the background of Jarndyce and Jarndyce, the court case, is so cryptic, you're kind of wondering, okay, well, what about the details of the court case? Like, can we get some of that tea? And Dickens never really gives it to you. And so at the end of the novel, I was like, so why would he do that? Dickens, he knows how to construct the story. Why would he purposely make Jarndyce and Jarndyce the background of this whole novel and never really give us the details of the case? And this is what I came up with. It's more about the people who were involved with the case, how they handle the case, and what the case does to them. What type of person how does this court case shape the person, or how does this person allow this court case to shape them? And it kind of goes back to this concept of, when people become obsessed with something, they become consumed with something, it can destroy their whole life. It can destroy the people around them. It can destroy their relationships. So what happens to a people, what happens to a community, and what happens to its individuals when they become obsessed with something? What else are they missing out on? They have blinders on. And so what are they missing out on in life that's truly important? And we do see that in one character with his child, with his wife. Was it really worth it in the end, just to seek some type of financial gain that could have helped the family, sure, but was it really worth it in the end? And I think that's something that we can all relate to. I know acquaintances in the past who they became so obsessed on a goal that they put blinders on to some of the more meaningful things in life they were so focused on, well, if I can't do X, Y, and Z in life until I achieve, until I get this job, until I make this amount of money. And then they let relationships fall by the wayside. So I think that's what Dickens was really trying to hit home with this. I would be curious to know, if you read this book, why do you think that Dickens was so vague about the nature of Jarndyce and Jarndyce? Why did he never really give us the details of the court case? I'd be curious to know your thoughts on that. So there we have it. That's kind of my overview of Bleak House. I have 3% left on this laptop. I'm trying to speed it up. I really found this to be an engaging novel with a whole slew of characters. Yes, it's 1,000 pages, but compared with some of the other Dickens novels that I read, I felt like it wasn't as overwhelming, and I didn't feel as bogged down by the subplots with this one. Again, I found this was very approachable, and I didn't really get confused with the subplots in this novel. I enjoyed Esther again as a central character. She had a Jane Eyre kind of sense to her. Marion from The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins. She kind of reminded me a bit of her because she has a bit of sass, and I appreciated that. Dickens wrote her voice really, really well. And again, this is my 4th Dickens novel, and this novel helped me better understand how Dickens constructs his novels. Yes, his novels were serialized, and so they were released over a period of time. Often it would take a year or two for the full novel to come out in the serialized forms. And each chapter is treated a bit like its own episode in some way. And so he uses each chapter, the beginning few paragraphs or pages, to set the scene for that particular chapter. And then he goes into the details. So once I kind of figured out that formula, I had a better understanding of where he was going, and I didn't get too consumed or wrapped up in, why is he giving me all this detail? I'm like almost done recording this, and I've got my glass of water that I meant to move out of the way. I've got an adapter for something. It's staying there. But yeah, so I wouldn't, even though this is a big novel, don't be intimidated to start with Dickens within maybe the first Dickens novel, the second or the third. I found this to be quite approachable, like I've said. And then one thing that I also like about Dickens, which is something that people don't like about Dickens, but this is something that I do like, his characters are fairly static. There's not much character development. He shows you who the characters are, and that's who they are. Even the ones that are seemingly good, he gives you enough to know, this one probably can't be trusted, and your gut instinct is usually right. The way that I look at the way he writes his characters is they're caricatures of human nature. So you typically have characters that represent lust or greed or innocence, beauty, evil, intelligence, and you may have a couple of characters who may embody a few of these characteristics, but your good characters tend to be good, your bad characters tend to be bad, and so they have the corresponding traits that would go stereotypically with good and bad. There's a plane overhead. But that doesn't bother me because there's so many characters. I don't really feel like I'm missing out on too much character development. And also he's so good at painting the picture of who these people are that it's not something that I feel like I miss when I'm reading Dickens. He does have his own formula, that's for sure. And lastly, again, it's a Dickens novel. You're going to get beautiful writing. Sit back, enjoy the ride, enjoy the language. The man can turn a phrase. And this is just an example of how he described a snowy night. There are powdered heads from time to time in the little windows of the hall, looking out at the untaxed powder falling all day from the sky. And in the same conservatory, there is a peach blossom turning itself exotically to the great hall, fire from the nipping weather out of doors. Lush, so good. That's just why I enjoy Dickens. And the more I read him, the more I like him. My first Dickens novel was Great Expectations, and I thought it was okay. But the more that I read him, and the more I get what Dickens is doing, and now he writes, and I continue to figure out his formula. I don't know. The more I enjoy him, and I look forward to reading more of his works. One of my goals in life is to read every novel that Dickens has written, and I have only read 4, so I got a lot to go. But again, I enjoyed this novel immensely, and I rated it a 4.5 out of 5. Tale of Two Cities currently is my favorite Dickens novel. but this is a novel that will resonate with me, and I will continue to think about this novel. And one day I may even choose to reread it. It's a big one, but because I enjoyed it, and when I would get into this world, I was just reading it and flipping through the pages, and it didn't feel like a 1,000 page novel to me, which is saying a lot. This is Dickens. So I would be curious to know if you've read this novel. Did you like this novel? Did you not like this novel? I love hearing dissenting reviews. If you hate it, you hate Dickens, I want to hear it. My feelings will not be hurt. Also, if you're a fan of Dickens, what is your favorite Dickens novel and why? I would be curious to know that. Again, don't forget to like, subscribe, leave me a comment. Let's chat in the comments. And I will also leave my links below, my Instagram page, so you can also read my book reviews, because every book that I review on YouTube will have a written review on Instagram and on my blog, because I know that everybody uses Instagram. So thank you for joining me. Thank you for putting up with this somewhat... I feel tense during this review because it took me 3 hours to get to this point. So thank you if I seem rambly or spacey. That's why. Again, thank you for your patience. Thank you for joining me. And we're done. Scene.